everyone, this is Catherine O'Connell and welcome to Lawyer on Air. If you are looking for inspirational stories about women in law, then this is the podcast for you. Join me and my lawyer ladies as we enjoy a glass of wine after a hard day at work and talk about the world of women in law. It's my passion to share stories of amazing legal ladies who are working as in-house legal counsel, who have law firm roles, who are leading on boards, and who are doing law differently. From time to time, I will also invite special guests on the show to share their insights on legal recruiting and tips for getting hired as a successful lawyer in Japan. I hope you will enjoy getting to know these amazing women who I am so proud to share a profession with. I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy the show. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode in the Lawyer on Air podcast. In this episode, I share with you another diverse story of a woman lawyer working in Japan. I'm Catherine, the host of the show, and I'm a lawyer based in Tokyo for more than 20 years, and I love helping unlock the wisdom of the stories that women lawyers never tell. My guest today is Miyako Ikuta. She's a partner in the Tokyo office of Kitahama Partners. As a qualified lawyer in France, New York, and Japan, her main practice areas are in corporate law, IP law, and data privacy law. She has extensive experience in court proceedings in France and in Japan, and she is also able to handle litigation matters, including cross-border arbitrations when requested. Miyako studied an LLB in Japan and furthered her study of law in France, starting her career as a French attorney in Paris. She then moved to Vietnam to practice, studied an LLM in the US, and has spent time at the EU Court of Justice in Luxembourg. Outside of the firm, Miyako is also an auditor, an outside director, and she serves on the Data Issues Committee and the Attorney-Client Confidential Communication Working Group. You can check out Miyako's full bio in the show notes. On this episode, Miyako shares that patience is the key to successfully navigating as a lawyer in Japan. Miyako tells her associates this and tells us why patience and observing society in Japan will serve you well for a successful career in law in Japan. She also shares her tips for preparing to take on a board role. You might be gunning for a role on a board in the future, or you may suddenly find yourself invited to join a board. And so Miyako tells us her tips to get ready to be ready when the invite knocks on your door. And we'll also hear some fun facts, such as her favorite saying in French, what superpower she would like to have to change Japanese society, and her new hobby. Let's get into it. Hello, Miyako, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation, Catherine.
Really glad to have you here. And you know, I have this question I ask every guest, so I'm going to ask you the same question. If we were meeting up in person, where would we be? Do you have a favorite wine bar or restaurant that you love to go to? And what would be your choice of beverage off the menu?
Okay. It's very difficult to choose. There are a lot of restaurants in Tokyo. I'm living in Yokohama, actually. So if you have any chance to come to Yokohama, I can introduce to you a very good fish fish restaurant. But it's very far from the Tokyo. It's around Namamugi. And so I just found out very recently, and there's a fish market in Namamugi area. And I discovered there is a restaurant. I noticed for long, but I didn't try to go inside. And 2 weeks ago, I decided to go, and that was fantastic.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's quite cheap, because it is in the market, but it's a really cozy, small outside market. It's not like Toyosu or, it's really, really small fish market, the traditional one on the Tokaido highway. It's on the way to Kyoto. From Tokyo to Kyoto, there's a Namamugi area, there's a fish market. That could be one good choice.
Sounds nice. Do they do like all kinds of different ways of cooking fish? So sashimi as well as cooked?
very limited menu they have. They have a lot of raw fish.
Oh, I
And
love
they have
sashimi
some
though.
grilled fish
Oh,
as well.
okay.
But
Wow.
they are very, very fresh, so that's why
Sounds
they're great.
nice.
Yeah.
And would you have something to drink with that, like a sake, or would you do non-alcoholic?
Um,
What would you have?
Usually I like bubbles.
Oh, good.
So I like, yeah, champagne or beer or highball. I mean,
Oh,
any
wow.
bubbles I
Nice.
like.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, exciting to take a trip to Yokohama. I guess when it's summertime and we have a bit more yoyu, right? A bit more flexibility in our schedule.
Right.
It's a thing to do, right? You're not rushing. You can go out and have a lovely dinner or lunch and then come back into Tokyo if you're living in Tokyo. That's really great
Mhm.
information. Thank you. So let's get into it then. The run of questions are pretty much the same for every guest, but there's a little bit different each time because each guest is different. But I do usually ask just to think a little bit further back when you were younger. What kinds of
Okay.
adventures or dreams were you imagining for your future back when you were so young? Do you remember that?
My father used to move around within Japan. He used to be the public officer, so we had to change the place every 3 or 4 years. So when I was young, I thought that, if you are female, if you have to follow those kind of people, you have to quit every 3 years, your job, which is not very convenient. So when I was young, I thought that it would be great to have some qualified something, the architect or lawyer or, medicine. And so you can continue if you want, even though you have to move with your husband.
Hmm.
Or I thought that probably it's good to be a journalist or the writer. You can probably move around. I saw that my mother, who used to be dentist, and
Yes.
she had to quit her job because of my father, because
Hmm.
he has to move around every 3 or 4 years. So
Right.
she tried to do some dentist work within that region, but she has to quit within after 3 years or something like that, and it was not very fun experience for her, I think. So
Hmm.
she was quite unhappy with that. So I saw it.
Right. You
So
saw that,
yeah.
yeah. But
Mm.
you're saying that you actually don't mind the moving around. You think something like a journalist or writer might have meant you had to move around, but that was not too bad for you to think about doing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought that it's great to change the place
I
itself.
see.
It's not very difficult for me. And if you can change the place, you can change the friends as well. And it's sometimes very sad to quit, of course, but
Sure.
you can have other new friends. You can meet other people.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
look what you did. I mean, great to change the place. You have had a really interesting background. You've been in France and Vietnam and Luxembourg and the US as well as Japan, of course. And we're going to talk about that because
Mm.
especially that French component was really interesting for me when I was reading your profile. But when you talk about what you've just mentioned now, when did studying law and becoming a lawyer come up for you?
Actually, my father used to be judge,
Oh,
and
is that
yeah,
right?
before becoming judge, he used to be a lawyer. And so law faculty is something we are very used to hear all the time.
Yes, you would have heard it
And
over dinner or any time he was talking
yeah,
about it.
something like that. Yes. And my father said that even though you are female,
Yes.
if you go to the faculty of law as a major of the social science, rather than economy or rather than other social studies, probably law faculty would be the good choice for female to open the horizon.
Wow, open your horizon.
Yeah, you can have more choice to if you want to get into a company or something like that. That's
Great,
he suggested me.
great advice, right? So he's
I
helped you
don't know.
there. And then, there's a difference though between someone like your father suggesting it and then actually doing it. But you did go and take yourself off to Ritsumekan right,
Yes.
university, and did an LLB. And then the next component is that further study that you did in France. Where did that come from? I'm so curious to know what took you from Japan over to France.
Yeah, actually, I took the exam within the university. That is the exchange program
Oh, I
organized by
see.
American University
Yeah.
when I was a third year student. And I took the exam and they decided to let me go on the
Ooh.
fourth year. So I went to France because of that exchange program.
What happened when you arrived in France? What was it like?
I studied French as
Oh,
a second language at the university,
oh, got
but
it.
that's all. So I speak very poorly at that time. And so when I arrived in France, there were two other students from Sofia University. They
Mm.
were from the Faculty of French language and French literature. So they could speak, some French. I tried to speak a little bit, but I remember that the professor who received me disappointed me, disappointed a lot by seeing me that I couldn't really speak very well at
I
that time.
see, but you must have improved because you then started as a French attorney after that
Right.
study,
So
right? Baker McKenzie. So tell me about that bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I studied 1 year within the exchange program, but at the end of the 1 year, that program didn't have enough financial support.
Yeah.
So at the end,
Mm.
so I couldn't really return to Japan. So I decided to put the application to other universities, and including the University of Tours, where I used to live, and the University of Paris. And the University of Paris replied to me in the first place. So I decided to move to Paris.
Wow.
I studied 2 years about in the graduate school. At the time, there was no law school in France. There was only
Ah,
faculty,
oh,
law
I see.
faculty. And so I wanted to get into the graduate school, and they said yes if you can finish your law school in Japan. So I negotiated with
Oh,
with American faculty to make me graduate with the studies I made during
yes.
the one year exchange program.
Wow. My goodness. And then you did join a law firm in Paris. So I can imagine it was really unusual for someone who was Japanese to be
Right.
a French speaking Japanese attorney in Paris, right?
At that time, that there was a little bit complicated period of time for France because there was a transition period for France to become a EU, and so they were integrating the legal titles. For the UK, for example, the solicitor and barristers, and for France, which title would be the equivalent lawyers. And so there were a lot of profession at the time in France. So they tried to integrate into one profession. There are still several professions in France, but there was a profession which called conseil juridique. And so I became the trainee of conseil juridique. That was the only possibility for foreign people to become a lawyer in France at the time.
Ah,
Bacon McKinsey invited me because I did some traineeship there, and
yes.
at the end they told me that if you want to become an associate, that would be great because there is a transition period now between the conseil juridique and avocat, which is the
Avocat. Yes. Avocat.
full
Yes.
attorney. And so the conseil juridique will be integrated into avocat so that all foreign qualified conseil juridique can become automatically avocat.
Great.
So if you accept, you will be the one of the very few Japanese who are qualified in France. So
Goodness.
that'd be
Yes.
great. So that was the offer of the Bacon McKinsey at the time.
Amazing. And you still have your qualification or you kept your license for
Yes.
France as well.
Yes.
Yes. When you speak English now, I can hear a French accent. Did you
That's
know
nice.
that?
I have a heavy accent in
When you
French.
accent, when you say accent, I can hear a French accent. It's just beautiful to hear you do that and to have your speciality, because I think that's continued all the way through what you've been doing. And that probably also just my curiosity about your next visit out of Japan is in Vietnam. And I know Vietnam was once French territory or
Yes, French
yes,
colony,
right?
the
Colony,
former,
yes.
yeah.
And
So that
so is that a connection with the language in Vietnam for you, or is it totally different?
there's a connection.
Oh,
It means that the one of my bosses was French and who is the originally Vietnamese. So he immigrated into France with his family in 70s or something like that. He was one of my boss. He wanted to set up a branch office in Vietnam. So when I started my career, I was with Baker McKinsey, but then I changed it to a middle-sized law firm, which called Mandel No Associé. And Mr. No is he is originally Vietnamese. He's French. He's very, very French, but he is original Vietnamese. So he invited me to go to Vietnam because he said that there are many, many Japanese who are coming to invest in Vietnam during 90s. I mean, it was the Doi Moi period, and they tried to open up their economy in Vietnam. So that was allowed to set up a foreign law firm. And once they set up the branch office, I was seconded to that branch office by my boss. Yeah, so that's why I had to
right.
spend 18 months.
But
Yeah,
you're doing
about
18 months or so. You're doing something very original, and not many people would have done that. And, before we pressed record today, we were talking about the lack of role models, because you and I are coming through sort of the same generation.
right,
And I know, and I think you're the same, that at the time we came through, there weren't really many role models ahead of us. Now I think some younger lawyers may have role models in different ways, and people talk about role models, but even role model wasn't really a word or a concept.
right.
Perhaps when we were lawyers, didn't really think about it. We just did our own thing and carried on, and maybe someone looked out for us. But how was that for you? Did you have any kind of role model, anyone that you think, maybe it was Mr. No, who helped you along the way? And or would you really have been forging this path yourself, do you think?
I was helped by a lot of people, of course, but I didn't have really the role model, and I didn't have even the same generation, same promotion. Younger lawyers who are becoming lawyers in Japan, for example, they are coming at the same time. The 3 or 4 lawyers arriving at the same time, so they call each other as the same promotion, but
Mm,
there's no such a thing, neither. So at my generation, of course, at the Baker McKenzie, there are a lot of very great female French lawyers, including Christine Lagarde. Do you know her?
yes,
Yeah, Christine
regard.
Lagarde. She was
Yeah.
one of my boss.
Ah, right,
She, yeah, used to be the partner of Baker McKenzie Paris. She's a labor law specialist,
right.
and she
Yeah,
was already very, very successful at the time. Very studious, very patient, and very intelligent, and very tough as well. I mean,
right.
physically. Yeah.
It's interesting too what you say about the doorkey, right? People who join at the same time and have several other colleagues around them of the same age. But we didn't have that. I didn't have that either, and I hadn't really thought about it. We sort of are there alone, and so you do require some connection with perhaps older associates who are maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of you, or the partner who is the person you're reporting to look after you in some way. Otherwise, you don't really have anyone. But to have someone like Christine Lagarde there is must have been really inspiring.
Right, of course.
Mm,
But she was too brilliant to,
way ahead, too
yeah,
brilliant.
she became partner very young.
Oh, wow.
So I realized that the labor law is very, very difficult to choose. So I didn't
Right.
choose the, and
Through
yeah,
these days in France and Vietnam, can you remember some of the really good things or maybe some challenges that came up that you overcame?
in the beginning, because we are very few Japanese lawyers who are, practicing in France at the time. So every single Japan-related matters would come to us, even though it is, very difficult to ask for the fees, the so I was too young to give any advice about the divorce, but the many divorce came to,
Oh, I see.
yeah. Those kind of
Yeah.
things were very, very difficult for me to
Oh,
understand. And, because the divorce case are very, very specific. I mean, the clients are very, very emotional.
yes, indeed. There's another
So,
similarity there I feel for you with the things that I did too when family law cases came to me is that you don't actually know a lot about it. If you haven't been married, for example, don't have children, but you learn a lot about people and
right.
what they value and what they are thinking about in such an emotional state,
Yes.
don't you? So even though it's you may not know about divorce law or the right thing to do because it's so difficult in an emotional state that they are in, but you learn a lot about people, and I think that serves you very well as you become a lawyer later on. It has for me. What do you think?
Yes, many things to learn, of course, and we learn about the human beings.
It's a very difficult job. I put a big, high five to all of the family lawyers or people who work in this area because it's a real skill to be able to maintain your
Exactly.
presence during those periods when people are not in a good place. Mm. So now let's come forward. You're at Kitahama and Partners,
Yes.
and that's after working at some other Japanese law firms. But how has that experience in, before that, France and Vietnam, prepared you for the kind of work you are doing now?
Actually, I realized that in Vietnam, it is no longer the period of French language.
Ah,
And I mean, for French law firms, it is very difficult to recognize, of course. But many Vietnamese switched already from French to English
right.
at that time.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So I realized that the English is the real communication tool for international, the cross-border matters.
Mm, mm.
So I decided to go to the US. After I came back to Paris for several years, I started to apply the law school in the US. So I decided to go to law school in New York and Columbia University. I took the LLM course at the Columbia University.
Right. So you're sort of putting aside some of the French language going around in your head and start the LLM at Columbia,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
I
see.
realized that if you want to do something more important, even if you want to stay for your life in France, probably it's not necessary.
Right.
Probably
Yes.
most of our clients were Japanese at the time, the Japanese companies, and so if you want to serve well for Japanese companies who are investing in France, I had to master English language. Otherwise, I cannot be very useful. So that
Mm.
I thought that it is very necessary to go to either England or either the US. So I wanted to change the continent. So that's why I decided to go to the US.
Wow, right. So very, very focused on what you wanted to do. And you went to, as you said, New York, and you also joined a law firm there after you did the LLM, right?
Yes, I think that it is very important to practice law
Mm.
on site. I realized that when I practiced law in France, that was very useful. So if you go to the US and take the exam and that's it, some people don't do any traineeship there or just leave. But I think it is important to practice law. If you are qualified in New York, you have to practice sometime in New York. Otherwise, you cannot really tell that you're New York lawyer.
Right, that's a good tip, right? Don't just do the exam and come back. Actually, have some precious time practicing law while you're, there afterwards. Yeah. And you had another, you also had another time in Luxembourg, didn't you, with the
Yes.
European, was it Court of Justice?
Yes, that was very good experience because I graduated the Columbia Law School. There was a program for U.S. Students and Dean Acheson programs, which is the traineeship program at the Court of Justice in Luxembourg.
Mm,
So I joined the English UK cabinet at the time. And so I learned the EU law. I learned the law in France as well, but I practiced to some extent there.
right.
And that was very, very interesting program. And they even suggested me to extend more 6 months more. And
Mm,
I hesitated a lot, but I was waiting for the result of by exam.
yes.
So I wanted to go back to New York. And so there was some offer. And so I decided to go back to New York.
Oh, I see. So it's really connected, isn't it? You did your LLM and then there was a program that took you off to Luxembourg, but you wanted,
Yes.
you wanted to use your bar qualification, came back to New York and joined a
Right,
firm.
right.
I see. But your
Yes.
time there was not so long.
Yes. Because of the 9/11, 2 years later, we were very busy before 9/11. But after 9/11, we were very busy to help many Japanese companies to withdraw the market, which was quite depressing.
Yes.
So I helped them a lot for a year or something, but I realized that it is not the experience we can, benefit from for long future. But I wanted to have other experience than that. So
Well, thank you to you for helping companies at that time and to all the lawyers that did stay around and help. And you came back to Japan, but
some of my friends I used to know from my French time said that the Tokyo is very busy, so why don't you come back to Tokyo?
mm, mm,
And I realized that as a Japanese, I was not qualified in Japan at the time. I was qualified in France and New York, but not in Japan. And many clients ask me, why don't you?
you're
Wow.
Japanese. Why are you not qualified in Japan, right? Well,
That's
sometimes
one
things are
natural
different.
question.
So
Yeah,
but you
so
went and got qualified. Is that what happened?
so at least I wanted to have some experience in a Japanese law firms. So
Yes.
I decided to come back to Japan. And then Japan start to have a law school system at the
Yes,
time.
that's
So
right.
I just joined the one of the law school, Waseda Law School, and they qualified after
Yeah.
that
Well, there you
as
go. And then the
yeah.
clients can say, well, you are you're already qualified, but just qualified in Japan. It's a bit of a difference. Thinking back to that 9/11 time, do you really think now it was a waste of time? Or how do you think about it?
I don't think so, but it was very stressful for me at the
Mm,
time not to have enough work to do
yeah, yeah.
as associate, because I realized many paralegal even lost their work because the younger associates were so
Mm.
stressed not to have enough work, and they took the work from paralegals.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think if that happened again, or if other associates are experiencing that, not having much work, that they should move? Or do you think they should gaman, stick with it for a little bit and ride it out? What would you
It
say?
depends on your situation. If you are the U.S. citizen and you New York lawyer, you have to be probably patient and you can go through it and you can have other phase
Mm,
would come and probably you have to, stick on that for a while. But for me, because I did already the traineeship in France for several years,
yeah.
and I was in trainee period as a younger associate in New York for several years. But I was already 30, so it was a big stress for me not to be someone.
Yeah, you're kind of at your prime almost. But now, you're in this great firm that's well known in Japan, a mid-size, I would say, correct?
Yes,
Yes?
mid-sized firm. We are probably 10th largest law firm
Right.
in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how has all the experience that you had in the EU and, France, Vietnam, has that continued to be part of what you're doing now in your daily
Yep.
work? Yeah.
Yes, sure, sure. I'm doing a lot of European related matters now. So
Mm.
it helps me a lot to be a partner, which is very difficult job, I think, for even male lawyers. It's very difficult work.
Partnership is a difficult job.
Yes, to be a partner,
Mm.
and you have to earn, enough to educate your younger associates as well. You have a
Yes.
lot of responsibility, so it's a huge work, I think.
Yes. What sort of advice would you give to someone who wants to do what you're doing? What kind of steps should they take to get there?
I try to explain to them to be a little bit more patient. It's very easy for younger lawyers now to move and change the law firms or the becomes a in-house lawyer, which is not bad thing, I think. But for our period, that was not possible.
Right, I see what you're
There was
saying. Yeah.
no such a possibility. You have to be patient anyway, and if you are obliged to change, you change. But otherwise, you try to do what you are doing with full strength of your intelligence, and so that makes you stronger as a lawyer. And so if you are if you can do it when you were young, that would be a good investment for you for later, I think. But I try to explain the younger lawyers in our firm, but they don't really, I don't know if they listen to me
Did
or
you
not.
just say that the patience makes you stronger?
Yeah, patience. Patience is
Uh-huh.
very important, I think,
Mm.
and to stick with your work in front of you, and you work your given place.
Yeah, great. And I mean, I want to ask you the one big piece of wisdom, right? The one thing that you would leave for future generations that you've learnt from your career so far. Is there one thing that stands out?
After all, I like this work because the law it makes you realize that it's based on the human rights. I started to get interested in law when I was in high school because my privacy was violated by my parents all the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
And I was very shocked to ask many, many questions by my parents all the time when I come back late. Where were you? With whom are you? And they are even look at my letters,
Oh,
when I receive or I send.
right.
At the time, there was no email,
No.
so,
Yeah.
and the only way to communicate with my friends were telephone or letters. And so I was very shocked as a teenager um, to be violated my privacy. And I read in the Japanese constitution, which says that there is a privacy for everyone. And
Mm.
it's a great thing. And I realized that the law can protect people and to make you stronger. And so I think learning law is something very, very good thing for not only females, of course, but
Mm.
for the female who has sometimes a weaker position, and
Wow.
then
Yes.
male lawyers sometimes.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, you
Oh,
can explain with the law what you are saying is wrong
yeah. It
because it
underlies
doesn't.
everything, doesn't it? Underlies society and cohesiveness in the society.
Yes.
Indeed. Or indeed, you do some other things there that help with the society, such as working in the bar association and the Japan Federation of Bar Associations. So you carve out some of your time to do the work to support those, the committee or the functions there, right?
Yes, I'm a little bit doing a lot of things, too many things probably.
What do you like about? I think one of them is working on a data issues committee and another working group,
Yes,
mediation as well. What do you like about doing all those activities?
I'm doing the data matters because because of the privacy and the violation
Yes.
of privacy. I think it's very, very basic human rights, the
Mm,
privacy, which is not respected enough in Japan, I think. So that's why I'm very interested in data law and the idea of the GDPR or something like that, and very, very interesting for me.
really
And so,
great. Yeah.
yeah, so I wanted to learn more. And many convenient tools are very convenient, of course, but at the same time, it's very dangerous sometimes to about when you are talking about the privacy. And I'm doing the attorney-client privilege working group, and we don't call it the client attorney privilege one because there is no such a thing in Japan. But what we are trying to is introducing the attorney-client privilege in Japan.
Oh, is that
I
what you're up? That's what you're doing. That would be
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah, I
Mm.
think it is very important, especially for the administrative procedures, because the Japan tried to explain that the criminal procedures and administrative procedures are different. So for the criminal procedures, you have to respect the human rights, but less for the administrative procedures.
Uh-huh.
We don't agree.
Right. And do you think that's going to change the law on that?
uh, we must be patient.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah, but we have to keep saying that would happen the same thing, the criminal procedure. In the beginning, we have less protected human rights, but even though we have the very protective constitution after the World War II, it is not respected enough by the police or by the prosecutor. And now they realize that it is important to respect the human rights, even the criminals. So it's
Mm,
changed because the lawyers were persistent and
mm.
with these rights, and they gradually the people realize that it is the good thing for everybody.
Yeah, interesting. I hope with your patience that things change and you can make a difference. This would be something really amazing to change within Japan because it's very hard to sometimes get change in this country. But if you can work on that patiently and make a change, that's really fantastic. Good luck.
Thank you.
And
Yeah. I think
mm,
we need more legal mind. I mean, in Japan, and we have to persuade more people who are working for the government or for the administration or the academics and etc. The people don't know what are the human rights really, even though
mm,
they are written in the constitution.
right.
Although they are feeling every day in a daily life, they don't realize that they are protected well by the human rights.
Yeah, don't give up. I saw something today about that. It was a quote that I read in Never Giving Up. No matter what the odds, my thought is failure is temporary, giving up is permanent, right? So not giving
Mhm.
up, right? Otherwise it's permanent. If you do something, it won't change. So keep going. Thank you so much for all you're doing. And I know as well you are doing activities within companies
Yes,
as auditor in a public agency and a listed company, as well as an outside director on a company listed in the growth market of the TSE, the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Tell us
right.
about these roles. I'm not sure how you're fitting all of this in, but tell me about the roles that you're doing. And perhaps I think people who are listening, they always want to know what are the 2 or 3 tips that they should do to help prepare themselves for a future invitation to join a board. So maybe tell us a little bit about the roles that you're doing so we can get an idea, and also maybe your tips to prepare people for their future board role if they're thinking about that.
Well, it's very difficult for me because I was just invited by someone who I know, so I didn't look for joining those kind of roles. So because of my background is almost all cross-border basis, so I do a lot of international works, but not really domestic works. But if you join a company as an auditor or the outside director, you should know that company very closely, and your perspective is a little bit different from being a lawyer, and so you can learn more about the companies, which is very good thing, I think. And as you know, the very many female outside directors or auditors are very recommended by the Japan Stock Exchange. So many female lawyers are becoming the corporate auditor or the outside director, and which are very good thing, I think.
Yes, it is. I think
Mm.
it's really great to hear. I think what your point you mentioned about perspective is different to being a lawyer or a third party, like an outside lawyer, right? So
Right.
that is true. But how is it true? Why? Because some people may think, well, I'm a lawyer, so I just go on the board and act like a lawyer and give advice? But it's not like that, is it? It's different.
Yeah, I think it's different because if you're auditor, you cannot really advise as a third party law attorney.
That's
And
right. The law
yeah,
department or the legal department give the legal advice. So what do you do as a lawyer, as a corporate auditor or an outside director? But that's your role, right? You are a
yeah,
lawyer by your
yes.
qualification. But how is it different when you become
Mm,
a board member?
I think it is always very useful to make a lawyer, corporate auditor, or outside director because we are kind of skill of the reasoning more than probably other professions. So for the complicated matters, we can analyze more easily than other people.
I think too, that's a really good point that we've got the reasoning skills and analytic skills. And also, I think the experience that we've had of dealing with so many different matters when you're a
Exactly.
lawyer inside a law firm or giving advice as an outside lawyer to
That's right.
others,
That's right.
you really have so many experiences and you can give that experience to the board. You can say, in this case that I did previously, this kind of thing happened. And although the facts now are a little different, I think what they did there was really useful. And perhaps you could try this, or, you can give a lot of advice or guidance
Exactly.
from your experience, I believe, as well.
Yeah, that's right. The people who are working for that company don't know necessarily other cases in other companies, but we can provide those kind of other examples. We can explain what would happen with other companies or different situation.
Right. So in your case, you hadn't really thought about board roles until someone invited you, and then you started thinking, oh, that could be interesting, and added that into your career.
I didn't decide to do those kind of work, but I started with the ELCA, which is the environmental agency under the Ministry of Environment, and as a auditor. I realized that is very interesting because you can have a lot of insights and you can learn a lot. Of course, I try to provide as much as possible the information I collected otherwise. But what is interesting is that you can be a member of a company or the agency
Yes.
and have a lot of insights. So you can be very, very close with the corporate people.
Right. So in your case, you were invited and you weren't really thinking about it, but some people are actually thinking about it as a role, aren't they? I think a
Mm.
lot of people
Sure,
are
sure,
thinking of
sure.
adding it. So for those people who are thinking about it, how would you help them by giving them some information about how they might prepare for when someone does ask them, they're kind of ready or getting ready, ready to be ready, shall we say? Is there anything you would suggest to them?
I think if there is any offer, don't hesitate to take and to prepare. You have to learn well about the corporate law, of course,
Yes.
and about the companies, listed companies, and as a general. So it depends on the industry, but you have to learn the industry as well.
Yes.
So you have to make many things to prepare. So depends on the company, but
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
many things to prepare.
Good advice. Wow, okay. I think we're nearly at the end, but I did want to ask you just perhaps for anyone who's listening to this who might not be in Japan but thinks about the things that you've done. You've gone to various countries and done amazing things, learnt other languages, etc. But would there be any tips you would give them, anyone who's thinking of coming to Japan, and how they can be successful as a lawyer in Japan? And that could be male or female, but your top tips for long-term success as a lawyer working in Japan.
Wow. I'm not successful yet.
Ah, I might differ in my opinion on that, but Kenson,
But
Kenson, you're being a bit a bit of humility going on there. But anyhow, just tell me your
um,
tips, putting that
mm,
aside.
I mean, Japan is not a very easy country, I think, to be integrated very well because of the most of the people are Japanese, and so it's less mixed culturally, probably. But at the same time, it is very interesting country because you can see many different religious people who are living together in Japan and without conflict, and which
Mm,
is a great thing. And I think,
yes, people need to be aware of that, especially not having language. It can be more difficult to integrate. And so I found myself, being patient as you've been using that word a lot, but also observing people and learning by observing and not always acting fast, but waiting to be
mm,
asked or waiting to find the time to be when you say something, remembering you're in Japan, but also just to observe is really important. What are other people doing here? How are other people carrying themselves? And that can be quite a key factor for success, I believe.
that's right. Yes,
Yeah.
observing is one of the Japanese character probably as well.
Yeah, probably.
Because when we go outside Japan, we know that Japanese people are not very pushy.
Oh, so they're not
I
pushy?
mean, yeah, they try to be very quiet, and because they are observing, Japanese people, observing
Right.
other people, and if they learn how the people react, and then they try to get integrated. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, the sense of integration is very, very important when you try to understand Japanese people, I think.
All right. Well, how about just a few quick questions at the end? I'd love to know if you've got a favorite saying or some words that you often use, like it might be a kotowaza or something in
Ah,
English or
yes.
Japanese or French even.
My favorite French proverb is the chaque chose a un son temps. It means that the things has a time, and so it is not a good timing. Sometimes it not right
Right.
now.
Everything has a season and you've got to wait for that season or the
Yes,
timing. Oh, that's
yes.
lovely. If you could have a legal superpower, something you had as a superpower as a lawyer, what would it be?
Make the Japanese people understand well what is the rule of law. If there is something has been done by the administration which was wrong, the rule of law became very, very important. But
Mm,
very, very few administrative matters can be disputed in Japan. It's very difficult. For the administration, it is very inconvenient that the people would have the tool to dispute with the administration, of course. So they try to avoid as much as possible. And so that's why sometimes they hide something from the people.
mm,
So that's why I think it is necessary to improve. And to improve it, you have to try to be transparent as much as possible with the people, and which is not necessarily done in Japan yet.
Okay, thank you so much. What's something about you that your colleagues or maybe some people listening might not know about you?
Probably they think that I'm very bold and they're doing what I did so far, but I'm quite shy.
Don't you have something you did regarding the Tokyo Marathon?
Tokyo Marathon, yes. I did the Tokyo Marathon in 2019, and that was a fun, and I enjoyed a lot. And I'm doing now Kokyo Run. It's the
Yes, the
Imperial Palace
Kokyo
Run.
is the Imperial Palace, isn't it?
Yeah, with
And
my colleagues.
good. You're running around the Imperial Palace, which we see a lot of people do when we take a taxi or we're around that area of the city. So I'll
Yeah,
keep an eye
it's
out for
fun.
you. Maybe I'll find you running and yell out to you, hi, and hope that you can remember who I am.
Yeah, why don't you join us?
Oh, yes, that sounds like a great idea. Okay, well, Miyako, we have come to the end of our truly incredible chat today, all about privacy and data and the things that you care about and how you're going to make a difference in this world. I think you're going to be a game changer for Japan in the laws and things that you're involved in. Thank you so much for coming on to the Lawyer on Air podcast. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you for the invitation. And it was a pleasure and the honor to be a part of your very famous podcasting.
For people who are interested in connecting with you and getting in touch, how can they do that?
So just email me.
So we'll put that email address into the show notes. And if you've enjoyed this episode, to the people who are listening and it's inspired you in some way, please do subscribe to Lawyer on Air. We'd love to hear from you and tell us what your biggest takeaway was. Also, you can go ahead and share this episode with someone you think would love to listen to it and be inspired to live a lawyer extraordinaire life. And that's all for today. See you on the next episode. Cheers, kampai, and bye for now. Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of Lawyer on Air. I really hope that you were inspired by the story you heard and that you discovered something new about women in the law. Please subscribe to the show so that you don't miss future episodes. And if you can think of even just one person to share this episode with, that would make my day. I invite you to connect with me to talk more. Jump on over to LinkedIn or Instagram where you can find me, or send me a message via my website contact page. That's all from me today. I look forward to seeing you right here on the next episode of Lawyer on Air. Cheers, kampai, and bye for now.